Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and today I have another trivia discussion or question for you. I don't think there's necessarily going to be a right answer to this one, but I saw an article recently talking about Judge and Soto and how they are obviously on track to be maybe one of the best offensive duos in a season, somewhere on that list, and that got me wondering who the best offensive duo of all time is in Major League Baseball. And so I kind of went digging, and as I mentioned before, I don't think there's necessarily a right answer. There's a lot of subjectivity here, but I thought I'd just talk about that today and see if we can hone in on maybe an answer that's more right than not, if that makes sense. So I guess before we start, we should think, how are we going to measure who the best duo is? Is it going to be over the course of their time together, their entire time together, or is it going to be based on a single season of their time together? Obviously, in the case of Judge and Soto, they don't have a lot of longevity in terms of time together, so they probably wouldn't rate if we're going based on careers, if that makes sense. But possibly in terms of a single season, they could rank on the list somewhere. And so, very interesting. I kind of went and did some digging, found several articles about it, and thought I would share my thoughts today with you guys. So thank you for stopping by and watching. So first of all, I found an article on a site called Cron, and it is the all-time best duos in Major League Baseball. Now this was back in 2017, so it's been a few years, but I think overall it's going to still give us something to go on here. And what I like about this ranking is they did the top 30 for one, but secondly, what they did was they started with wins above replacement as the guide, and I know that that is not the be all end all in terms of player value by any means, but I think it's a good starting point to use for the discussion. And so they use that as a guide, and then they are ranked according to two different metrics. One is the accumulated wins above replacement for the two players on a team, and then secondly was um, averaging averaging that over the number of years those two players were together. So that gives you like an average wins above replacement for that duo. That would give a little bit more value for players that maybe didn't play together for a long period of time, but were at peak level while they were together. So I thought that was interesting. And then what they did was they ordered the ranking, giving 2/3 weight to the accumulated wins above replacement and 1/3 weight to the average annual wins above replacement. So they're giving more weight, obviously, to the longevity of two players playing together, but still giving a third of the value to that average, if you will. So very interesting. I'm not going to go through all 30 players on the list, but I thought I'd go through maybe the top 10 or so, with a couple of honorable mentions. Uh, Thinking of the best duos of all time, I guess. Number 12 on the list, so here 12 and 11, I'll say are honorable mentions in the top 10, is Ron Santo and Billy Williams, who played for the Chicago Cubs from 61 to 73. And they are ninth all time in terms of cumulative wins above replacement, but average they fall to 21st. So that's interesting. Now, number 11 on the list is a duo I consider one of the all-time greats, and that is Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell from the Detroit Tigers from 77 to 95. Um, and their cumulative total is they rank fifth. Now, again, they were together for a long time, so they rank fifth all time in terms of cumulative, but their average annual, they fall all the way down to 29th. So there were some years in there that they weren't, that one or the other wasn't at their peak, if you will. So then we hit the top 10, and number 10 is Eddie Collins and Frank Baker from the 1909 to 1914 Philadelphia Athletics. 18th cumulative, but second average annual. And again, I think going back to that period of baseball, things kind of sometimes get skewed, I think, because you can have some players that really stood out from from their contemporaries during that time. That being said, Frank Baker won 4 straight home run titles back then, led the league in RBIs a couple of times. And of course, Eddie Collins, also a Hall of Famer, um, great on base percentage during his career. And so obviously they make the top 10. Number 9, Jackie Robinson and Duke Snider, 1947 to 56 Brooklyn Dodgers, 14th cumulative and 10th average annual. Again, great duo, I think. Amazing duo during that time. It's no shock that they're in the top 10. Number 8, we have Johnny Bench and Pete Rose from the 68 to 78 Cincinnati Reds, 12th cumulative, 13th average. And again, you have Johnny Bench's Rookie of the Year in there, his MVP years, um, his defense behind the plate, obviously. And then you have Pete Rose, who had an MVP year in there as well. And, 200 hit seasons, 100 run seasons, um, and the Cincinnati Reds pennants during that time. Number 7 is one that I always think of because they played in the era that I was shortly after I graduated high school, and that is the Killer Bees, Bagwell and Biggio for the Houston Astros, 1991 to 2005, 6th cumulative, 24th average annual. And again, um, just a killer duo, I think, during that time. Now we start getting into we're number 6 here. So number 6, we're getting into the top few here, and probably if you were thinking the top duos of all time, these would probably be some of the names you would think of. Number 6, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra from the 51 to 63 New York Yankees, 7th cumulative, 17th annual average annual, and during their time together, they played in 11 World Series. Just crazy, and they won 7 of those. So each of them had 3 MVP awards during their time together. What can you say? I guess what can you say? But there's 5 others that are better than that. Number 5 is another callback to a prior era, and that is Ty Cobb and Sam Crawford from 1906 to 1916 Detroit Tigers. Cumulative number 8 on the list, and average annual 5th. And, they were leading the league during that time in all sorts of stats. American League batting titles for Cobb, of course, slugging, OPS, stolen bases. Crawford is the career triples leader, of course, and he led in RBI 3 different times during that period, too. And they, of course, took Detroit to 3 pennants, 3 straight pennants, 1907 to 1909, even though they never won a World Series title together. Interesting. Number 4, another older era duo, and that's Honus Wagner and Fred Clark, 1897 to 1911. Louisville Colonels and Pittsburgh Pirates. They are second cumulative and 12th average annual. And again, a prior era, so things are a little bit more skewed, I guess, if you're just looking at just comparing straight numbers like this, I think. But still, in the dead ball era, those 2 were amazing players. Now we get the top 3. And I would say this is probably a pretty good top 3. I couldn't think of 3 duos better than these 3. And so let's see if you agree. Number 3, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, 1959 to 1971 Giants. They're 4th in cumulative, their 7th average annual. Um, Mays was near the top of the National League MVP voting for many years in a row. Uh, Drove in over 100 runs many years in a row. National League home run crowns. And then Willie McCovey, also 3 home run crowns himself. Led the NL in OPS and slugging 3 straight years. MVP in 1969. So you have a lot of awards between the two during that time, and it's no wonder that they're number 3 on the list. But there are still two that rank higher. Number 2, according to this list, is Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, 1925 to 1934 New York Yankees. They're number 3 in cumulative, but they are number 1 in average annual wins above replacement. They were the heart of the Yankees during that time. Leading in all sorts of offensive categories, of course. Gehrig had a triple crown in there, so that was another one. It's hard to think of a duo better than them. But according to this list, there is one, and that is, can you guess? The 1954 to 1966 Milwaukee/Atlanta Braves duo, Hank Aaron, Eddie Matthews. Number 1, cumulative wins above replacement, and 3rd average annual. And they were a true power combo. They averaged a combined 66 home runs and 202 RBI during their 13 seasons together. Average. They took the Milwaukee to a World Series title, National League pennant after that. Yeah, what can you say? What can you say? A great, great duo. Now, do I agree that they're number 1? Well, I looked at a couple other lists. And there are other ways to judge, of course, other than wins above replacement, right? For example, this other list that I found uses a weighted runs created, WRC plus, if you will. And it's weighted runs created plus, which factors in ballpark and era so that you can better compare players across eras and in different ballpark settings. And that list comes up a little bit different. What they did actually is they went by top 10 seasons. So not careers together, but top 10 seasons with the highest combined weighted runs created plus. And so I'm not going to go through the top 10 exactly, but I'll go through let's do the top 5. And I think you'll see where I'm going here. Number 5 is the 1932 New York Yankees with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Ruth and Gehrig, of course. Number 4, the 1928 Yankees with Ruth and Gehrig. Number 3, the 1931 Yankees with Ruth and Gehrig. Number 2, the 1930 Yankees with Ruth and Gehrig. And number 1, the 1927 Yankees with Ruth and Gehrig, who both had over a 200 weighted runs created plus during that season, 1927, when Ruth hit 356 with 60 homers and 164 RBI, and Gehrig hit 373 with 47 homers and 175 RBI. Crazy. So, these are the top seasons in weighted runs created plus all time, and 5 of the top 10 are Ruth and Gehrig. The top 5, if you will, are Ruth and Gehrig. So I think that has some weight as well. And again, I'm not trying to be biased here because I'm a Yankees fan, but pretty crazy. So who was number 6? Number 6 might surprise you. And that was 1989 Giants with Kevin Mitchell and Will Clark, believe it or not. That year, Kevin Mitchell hit 291 with 47 homers and 125 RBI. And Clark hit 333 with 23 homers and 111 RBI. Monster season for both of them and a monster year for them as a duo. So pretty interesting if you were wondering what the highest non-Ruth Gehrig season was according to this list. That would be it. Now, Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews are number 9 on that list for their 1959 season, where Aaron hit 355 with 39 homers and Matthews hit 306 with 46 homers. So, monster season for them, of course, that ranks number 9 on the top 10 list of seasons. And then there's the other another way of measuring, and that's OPS plus. OPS plus, which is your OPS rated against the average OPS of that particular year. So, for example, a 110 means you're 10% better than the OPS of the average for that particular season. And I found a thread where somebody had posted about this question, looking at OPS plus seasons, and they started by taking seasons, any season where a hitter had at least an OPS plus of 180 in at least 600 plate appearances, and then said, was there ever a season where you had two of those on the same team? And once again, we see Ruth and Gehrig for 1927, 1928, 1930, and 1931, where both of them had OPS plus over 180. In fact, two of those seasons, they both had OPSs over 200. So that's crazy. And according to that ranking, here is how that compares. Number 3, Mays and McCovey. Number 2, Aaron and Matthews. And number 1 in a landslide is Ruth and Gehrig. So, personally, I would say if I had to pick a top duo of all time, it would have to be Ruth and Gehrig. Not just in terms of longevity. They may not have been together the longest of anybody, but they had a many, many, many year span there where they were dominant as a duo in the league, to the point that 5 of the top 10 seasons, perhaps, were led by them. They had the top weighted runs created, for example, weighted runs created plus. So, and the top OPS plus seasons. So wins above replacement, according to that rating, they rank second. If you believe in that rating, 2/3 of cumulative career together, 1/3 average. But I personally would rate Ruth and Gehrig number 1 in my book. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is Ruth and Gehrig really number 1 in a landslide? Or would you think Aaron and Matthews or Mays and McCovey should be number 1? Or maybe somebody that we're not even thinking of or I haven't even mentioned would be your number 1 duo. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hopefully you found this interesting. Like all baseball things with stats, there's so many stats out there. It's a good thought experiment. I don't, even though my thought is Ruth Gehrig, and I have some evidence to back that up, I don't think that's the end of the story or the be-all, end-all answer to this question because, again, it's very subjective and there are multiple ways that you could measure it. So leave your thoughts down in the comments. If you're curious about my other content, head over to baseballmaelstrom.com. You can follow the 2 projects I have going on right now. One is a 1930s Best of the Decades tournament featuring season ticket baseball. And the other is a Payoff Pitch League. This is season 2 of my Payoff Pitch League that features teams of Hall of Famers in the National League and the American League playing against each other, along with one team in each league of non-Hall of Fame players that are also great players in their own right. So 4 teams in each league battling it out in a third of a season, a third of an MLB season, to see who the best is. And this is season 2 of that. So again, head over to baseballmaelstrom.com if you'd like to follow the content. And I post about a video a week here where I sometimes give updates on those leagues. Sometimes I have questions like this, trivia, that kind of thing. Or I also do some reviews of tabletop baseball games that you can check out as well. With all that said, thank you so much for stopping by and watching. And until next time, have a great evening.